Comrades, the global movement for disability rights began in a serious way in the 60s. Encouraged by the development of other struggles for civil rights, women's liberation, and the LGBTQ rights. Until then, it had been out of sight, out of mind for disabled people. Disabled people were invisible, lived with their families or in institutions. They didn't go anywhere because they couldn't. No public transportation, and if they did manage to get somewhere, there was no way to get in. No ramps, no elevators. As children, they might not go to school, not have friends to play with in the neighborhood, or interact with society in any way. And if they didn't assert themselves, nobody was going to go look for them. It was pretty bleak. The focus of the struggle in the 60s became independent living. This meant the ability to set your own priorities, to get out and do things, to be part of the community. Independent living centers popped up all over the country. There were organizations that advocated for the disabled, such as Sydney and New York, which recently brought a lawsuit against the MTA for pitiful compliance with the ADA. These centers provided moral support and physical support when possible. Now, prior to the 60s, the blind worked with the blind, the deaf worked with the deaf, all focusing on specific issues to their disability. But in the 60s, independent living was a situation where people with any kind of disability could become part of. The blind, the deaf, the mentally impaired, the mobility impaired supported each other, giving them bigger numbers and more effective clout. Rather than focus on their specific disability, they focused on things they had in common, like independent living. Now, independent living movement postulates that people with disabilities are the best experts on their own needs. Besides deep professionalization and self-representation, the independent living movement calls for demedicalization of disability. In other words, you don't just give somebody a pill because they don't look right, you know. Okay, they also argued for deinstitutionalization and cross-disability. That is, inclusion in the independent living movement regardless of the type of disability. Now, Medicaid is what made this possible. It pays for caregivers to provide the basics, such as cooking, cleaning, bathing, taking them to their jobs, and dealing with the outside world, such as going to Starbucks for a cup of coffee or just getting an ice cream on a hot day. Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's plan to cut billions from Medicare would return the social landscape to the pre-60 era. When the disabled say that they're fighting for their lives, they literally mean it. One of the early advocates of the ADA said, "Get into politics like your life depends on it," because it does. A breakthrough movement came in the 70s with reporter Geraldo Rivera's report on the Willowbrook State School in Staten Island. You may remember that. A doctor there, appalled by the conditions, gave Rivera a key to Building 6 so he could get in and expose the conditions. He got in and immediately started filming before the attendants could stop him. Now, Willowbrook had been built for a population of 4,000, but it held 6,000 in 1972 when he made the report. The ratio of residents to attendance was 50-1, so there's no way anybody could take care of them. Residents lay naked in their own feces on the bathroom floor, and Rivera said, "I can show you what it looks like, I can show you what it sounds like, but I can't show you what it smells like. It smells like filth, disease, and death." The report was one of those reports at a watershed moment that remained clearly in your brain forever. It brought the plight of the disabled to public attention and outrage. Conditions at the school didn't get sidetracked because the public was ready. The school was shut down. The time was right. The issue of Willowbrook had been raised before by Robert F. Kennedy, but nothing came of it. The disability rights movement had now started, and the people were ready to act. In 1988, there was a struggle at, you may remember, at Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., a school for the deaf. It was called Deaf President Now. The Board of Trustees was looking for a new president. There were 3 candidates, 2 deaf and 1 who could hear. And the board chose the one who could hear. The students were furious and staged an 8-day protest. They fought for and won to have the deaf president, a person that represented them. There were laws on the books all through this time, laws about access and laws about architectural barriers, but they remained on the books until the disabled community started organizing. For instance, in 1946, a study was started which took 40 years to complete. It was called Making Buildings Accessible to and Usable by the Physically Handicapped. The study looked at buildings that provided only steps to enter, lack of maintenance on sidewalks, locations not served by public transit. It was based on disability ergonomic research by physical therapists, biochemical engineers, and individuals with disabilities. It has been emulated globally, but doesn't seem to have been used here. Improvements didn't really start to happen until the Americans with Disability Act, which is the one we're fighting to keep now. The ADA was signed in 1990. That bill came as a result of pressure from the disabled community. My introduction to this struggle was Comrade Betsy Gimble. She had lost a leg as a result of a traffic accident. I remember waiting with her, watching the bus drivers just rolling by, pretending that they didn't see her at the bus stop. Betsy is a comrade that we can be extremely proud of. She was a pioneer in the disability rights movement, starting a group called Disabled in Action. She organized actions against the MTA to get access to public transit. She and fellow wheelchair user Steve Furchat, both in wheelchairs, went out daily. And I spoke to Rosie Neidenberg just a few minutes before the meeting, and she's the one who gave me the anecdote. They went out daily for a year to different bus stops with big placards demanding access to the buses. And finally, after a year, they won. Now, I'm pleased to say that attitudes have changed 180 degrees since that time. What I'm confronting now is drivers who do pick me up and who are very courteous and concerned about my safety, that they will make sure that I'm belted in, they will make sure that my chair is tied down and it won't roll, they make sure that I'm comfortable. You know, they make every effort to accommodate me, as opposed to what was happening to Betsy when the buses just went by without even acknowledging her. So things really have changed. In fact, one day I took too long to get settled, and people got a little angry, and so they were kind of grumbling. I couldn't hear it, but the bus driver did, so she just put her arms on her arm like this, and she said, "Okay, relax. It's Sunday. If you're in a hurry, take a cab." Also, other drivers have told me that what they would do, what they have done and would do if the population just overwhelms the wheelchair rider, they'll tell them to stop it, and then if they don't get out and let him load the wheelchair person, then he will take the bus out of service and drive the wheelchair person home. Forget it. So the attitude has definitely changed for the better. I've heard, Success of the fight for accessible public transit didn't happen overnight. ADAPT, which is the Americans Disabled for Access on Public Transportation, began in the 70s in Colorado. They're kind of a spontaneous act-up type group. They go out and perform civil disobedience. They do routine political work, and then if it's not successful, they go to nonviolent tactics like staging a die-in at Mitch McConnell's office last week. The fight for access to transit began in Denver, where ADAPT members surrounded a bus for 3 days, getting out of their wheelchairs at night, sleeping on the ground, tucking their placards under the windshield wipers of the buses, and they kept it up for several years until they succeeded. I think it took 5 years. I interviewed them for my article in the paper. They were thrilled to have the coverage, and when I said I was from Workers' World, one of them said, "Workers, huh? Then you'd be interested in this," and proceeded to tell me about their fight in the Kansas legislature to increase pay for personal care attendants. He said, "There is a bond that deepens between the disabled person and their caregivers. The attendants are really poorly paid, so we fought for a raise for them. We got $10 an hour," which was a nice increase from $7.50. Also, if the Medicaid is severely cut, it would mean a loss of 700,000 jobs. So this is the struggle that we face now, and one that we hope to present to the parade on Sunday. Keeping the gains and defending them from drastic cuts to Medicaid. This struggle has come to the fore at meetings of the Disability Pride Parade. Eddie Hute and I have been going to outreach meetings where we meet activists from many groups. Meetings are held in each borough, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Now, I met a woman who's preparing a book that lists accessible restaurants. So I started thinking, oh, I know a few. And then she said, but those restaurants have to have drive-in bathrooms. And I couldn't think of one. I found that it's going to be a very short book. So check it out. I went to some of my favorite restaurants and tried riding my chair inside the bathroom. I could get in, but I couldn't close the door. The only one that I found that was truly large enough to ride in was at BAM. So if you want to go to a movie, go to BAM. Recently, Eddie got me on the board for the parade. And this is where the issues arise. The struggle is between the people who want to raise political issues and the people that feel that just being there is enough. I mean, the point showing how strong we are is what matters. Now the way Eddie and I decided to work is we play good cop, bad cop. So I'm the bad cop. I raise a political issue like having the lead banner say, "No cuts to Medicaid" or "Defend the ADA," and get told it's not necessary. Then Eddie steps in and says very moderately, "Well, that would bring more people, don't you think?" Yeah. Now, we haven't cracked any barriers, but we're getting taken seriously. They like us because we work hard and get things done. And these are good people. I mean, they're not people that we fight with because they're terrible in preventing the struggle. They just have a different attitude. They want a better world too, but they have different strategies about how to go about it. So we don't take them on directly. We just try to point out how things can get done. Eddie volunteered to make the flyers for the parade, and he put a photo of Martin Luther King's banner on top. Now, they had not agreed to it, but nobody objected. It was fine. I wanted to have a large banner that said "No cuts to Medicaid" and "Defend the ADA." I got told that when it comes to issues, we could individually put anything we want on our signs, just not make it the official slogan of the parade. So everybody I talked to has been excited to make their signs. So we're going to have a lot of signs at the parade on Sunday. Now, I've been amazed at the public support. I mean, really amazed. I left some flyers with my physical therapist to hang on the walls of the office. She hung one and put the rest on a table, and people kept taking them. And when there weren't any left, one woman took the one off the wall and Xeroxed it. So the Disability Pride Parade is this Sunday, July 9, mobilizing at Union Square at 10 a.m., marching off at 11 to Madison Square Park, where there's going to be entertainment, food trucks, and games for the kids. Flyers are on the table about the parade. Now, all are welcome. It's not just for people who are disabled. We need all the allies that we can muster.